What is going on, Jet fans? Matt O'Leary back with another video. It's a very busy day in Jets land. It's Black Monday, and the New York Jets have announced a huge, long list of names that they will be reaching out to interview for both the GM and head coaching position. So what we're going to do today is go through everyone that the Jets have either interviewed or reached out to for an interview for both of those spots. Okay, here is how the Jets head coaching search has gone so far. They've had 2 interviews. They have 1 more tomorrow so far again, but Mike Vrabel has already interviewed. Ron Rivera has already interviewed. Rex Ryan will interview tomorrow. And here is the list of other names that they've reached out to today. Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings, who spent time as the Miami Dolphins head coach. Josh McCown, who is the quarterbacks coach for the Minnesota Vikings. Joe Brady, who is the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. Matt Nagy, who is the Chiefs offensive coordinator, also spent time as the Chicago Bears head coach. Arthur Smith, who was the Falcons head coach and the offensive coordinator this past year for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Brian Griese, who is the quarterbacks coach for the San Francisco 49ers, former NFL quarterback from the early 2000s. Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. Vance Joseph, and Bobby Slowick. Don't worry, we're going to go through how I feel about all those guys, and you guys can let me know how you feel in the comments down below. But here's the GM list, and then we're going to go and talk about how I would rank each one of these candidates, my excitement level, why I like them, why I don't like them, and all that fun stuff. But for the GM search, Chiefs, Mike Borgonzi, they've reached out to. Rams, Ray Farmer, they've reached out to. Eagles, Alec Hallaby, they reached out to. Thomas Dimitroff, the former Falcons GM, they interviewed. John Robinson, they interviewed. Jim Nagy, they interviewed. Louis Riddick, they interviewed. Mike Greenberg from the Bucks, and Ryan Gregson, who was the GM for the Indianapolis Colts, now an assistant with the Minnesota Vikings. Those are the names that the Jets have reached out to at both the GM and the head coach spot. It's a lot of names, so let's go through it. How I decided to break this down was a tier list, and I'll talk about each one of these guys in the tier. So in my excited tier, as in coaches that the Jets could hire that would get me excited, 2 names, Mike Vrabel and Brian Flores. Okay, so for Mike Vrabel, why I think he is the best candidate for the job. Proven success as a head coach of the Tennessee Titans, has gone on a deep playoff run, has a winning record. I think he just all around is the perfect candidate for what the Jets need right now. So I would put him number 1, but my pivot point, because it is important to note that the New England Patriots has fired Gerard Mayo as of yesterday. So we very well could end up seeing Vrabel end up in New England. My pivot, I think, which I put in my excited tier, would be Brian Flores. Now, Flores has done a very good job as the Minnesota Vikings defensive coordinator this year. He also worked under a head coach that I really respect a lot in Mike Tomlin the year prior. Things did not end well for him in Miami. He did have back-to-back winning records before getting let go after 3 years as the Dolphins head coach. But didn't have the best relationship with Tua Tagovailoa. Some people are afraid of having a young quarterback with him. I think he's learned from that. I also think there are a lot of other factors that excite me about him. Comes off as that no-nonsense kind of guy. Comes off as someone who could be a CEO style of head coach, especially paired with the right offensive coordinator, which we'll get into in a second, by the way. But those are the 2 guys towards my top. Then in that next tier, I have guys who I think could work. Would they be my most preferred option? No, but I do think that there's a world where it works out. And Aaron Glenn is on that list, had a phenomenal performance this past week as the Detroit Lions defensive coordinator. A Bill Parcells guy, spent a lot of time around Parcells, who was part of the Jets turning it around. Former Jets player, so knows the organization very well. Is a Dan Campbell guy. He followed Campbell from New Orleans to Detroit, so he's worked with him in a couple different spots. He's had success in a couple different spots. The thing that worries me, and maybe I hold this against him a little bit too much, is that it feels very similar to Robert Saleh as a well-respected defensive coordinator who's ready to make the jump. And I'm not discrediting anything that Aaron Glenn has done. I think someone should probably give him an opportunity. It feels a little bit repetitive. And I know my top two guys are defensive guys, but they've also been head coaches and had a few winning seasons under their belt too. Joe Brady, I put in my this could work tier. He hasn't been a head coach, but as an offensive coordinator, I think he's done a stellar job with the Buffalo Bills. Now, the knock against him is this just Josh Allen being Josh Allen, or is he actually good? And I do think he is actually good. Now, can he lead a team? I'm not sure, but can he run an offense? I think yes. I like the work that he did at LSU with Joe Burrow. I was optimistic about him when he was the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out. And he ends up getting a really good spot in Buffalo, and I think has proven to do a really damn good job. And look at the offense, how much it's changed in a good way from last year with the Bills to they made the switch and they got hot in the second half into what they have been this year. The next guy I want to talk about is Josh McCown. I put him in the yes for OC, no for head coach. So he hasn't even been an offensive coordinator yet. So I find it hard to believe that they're going to put him in a head coaching role, but I would be on board with a duo with Josh McCown as the offensive coordinator and Brian Flores as the head coach. I think that would be the move if, again, Mike Vrabel doesn't get hired by the New York Jets. Then that, I think, would be my pivot for me at least. But what I like about him a lot is played in the league for a lot of different teams, did wonders for Sam Darnold this year, is ready to take that next step to be a play caller. Well respected in this organization. I know it's been 2017, 2018 since the last time he was here, but I think he's ready to take that next step to an OC, not a head coach. Rex Ryan gets a tier of his own. He's nostalgic, good defensive mind from 15 years ago. I wouldn't go that route. I don't want to go backwards to a time where, yes, the Jets were very successful in 2009 and 2010. I'm just not convinced that he can be a good head coach in 2025. It's 15 years ago since Rex Ryan has had his, success in the NFL level. Things went poorly for him at the tail end of 2011 and then followed him through the remainder of his career with both the Jets and the Bills. I know John Idzik did him zero favors towards the end, but also when you factor in Rex getting his hands on the roster and influencing the draft, that's when things really got rough after that. So I'm not in on Rex. Vance Joseph and Ron Rivera are in a similar tier. I said Rex, but less fun. Now Vance Joseph as a defensive coordinator is interesting. I just don't think he's a head coach. It didn't go very well in his first tenure as a head coach, but this goes back to the Jets looking at people or candidates who have experience, and he fits that role as someone who does have head coaching experience. Same with Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera had more success. Granted, it's 10 years ago now. That team that made it to a Super Bowl, the Carolina Panthers. I did not like the job he did in Washington. I don't think they utilize their talent well. I think there's a chance he could be a good defensive mind, but I don't love him as a head coach. And he had a lot of influence on that roster in Washington the first year for sure. He was the interim GM, but then even after that too. So I just didn't care for his tenure in Washington. I wouldn't go down that road. In Adam Gase 2.0 is Matt Nagy and Arthur Smith. Both those guys. So Arthur Smith is a little bit different. He had success in Tennessee with Ryan Tannehill in 2020. And I thought he was a promising head coach candidate after that year. With Atlanta, he was a disaster. Just could not get quarterback figured out. Desmond Ridder did not take the steps they were hoping for. But there were also playmakers on that team that he just could not utilize really all that well. Whether it's, Bijan Robinson a couple years ago or Kyle Pitts and Drake London, like there's talent on that offensive side of the ball, yet they were consistently bad on that side. I think he is better suited as a coordinator. I would not go down this road as he essentially had 3 straight 7-10 seasons. And that feels very much so like hiring Adam Gase, and same for Matt Nagy, who has had success with Patrick Mahomes and with the Kansas City Chiefs, but not much success elsewhere. Did make the playoffs a couple of times with Chicago, but unable to develop two quarterbacks in Chicago. Got there in Mitch Trubisky's second season, made the playoffs that second year, but he was not the long-term answer there. And then you go to them drafting Justin Fields in his rookie year. It was not able to get anything going with Justin Fields either. I think he's really more of a product of Andy Reid. I don't think that's the route that I would go either. In the what are you guys doing here category is Bobby Slowick and Brian Greasy. So Slowick was a hot name a year ago after the success he had with Houston and rookie CJ Stroud. Stroud took a step back this year. That offense wasn't very good, even though they had a lot of talent on that offensive side of the ball. That gives me some pause. I don't think now's the right time for him to be a head coach. And for Brian Greasy, he has 2-3 years experience as a quarterbacks coach. Maybe as an OC, did some good things with Brock Purdy, clearly, but I don't think he's done enough in this league to get head coaching consideration. All right, now to my GM tiers. Here's how I view the GMs. So in my excited tier, I have two names. The first is Mike Borgonzi, who's been with the Kansas City Chiefs since 2009. I think they've done a lot well there. Clearly, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, they're two huge reasons for the success that the Kansas City Chiefs have had. But for me, I think with Borgonzi, he was there before Mahomes was there. He was there before Reid got there. So I think he was kind of able to oversee the turnaround and has served a bunch of different roles in that organization. He would be very, very high on my list. Same for Mike Greenberg with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's their cap guy. And he also worked under Tannenbaum when he was here with the New York Jets. He's a Long Island native, grew up a Jets fan. It would be a really cool story if they decided to bring him back home, kind of like David Stearns with the Mets. Although Stearns was running the show over there for the Milwaukee Brewers, a little bit different. Obviously, Borgonzi's not the GM, but he's been an assistant. Not Borgonzi. Greenberg's been an assistant GM for a few years in Tampa Bay, and I think has done some really good things with the cap over there. And seeing the turnover on that roster. I mean, they went pretty seamlessly from Brady to Baker Mayfield, and it's worked. Okay, now we get to some retread options. Retread, the guy that I actually kind of like is Thomas Dimitroff. I think he's had a mixed bag in Atlanta, but he did some good things and he ran them for a long time, and they had two different successful periods. There was some bad, need some work on the defensive side of the ball and some drafting issues, but in looking at the retread options, I definitely look at him as the best of the retread options. And that's why I would put him third on my list and be like, this could work. And it would be an adult in the building and kind of legitimize them. And I would put him a tier above the rest of the the retread guys. I'm not a huge fan of the other options who have been GMs already. Starting with John Robinson, who has interviewed already with the Tennessee Titans. I don't think he did a good job drafting. I think he made a really poor decision in trading A.J. Brown. I think there was obvious fallout between him and Mike Vrabel. Vrabel wanted to keep Brown. Robinson didn't and ended up trading him. Clearly, they couldn't come to an agreement. And then they draft Treylon Burks, and that was not a very good pivot from him. So that's not the route I would go. Ryan Grigson was the Colts GM, finished with a 500 record, but I think it was a really big reason for why Andrew Luck retired. He was never able to get the offensive line right. His drafts were horrible. Some wide receivers that he took early on. He had a really good first draft in 2012, but then things went pretty poorly after that from 2012 through 2016 he was there. And it got progressively worse. Like they hit their peak. Their first 3 years with Luck was pretty good. And then they were just very stagnant after that. And I worry about him being able to add to what's here. They have a good core, but I just don't think the Jets can trust a guy like Ryan Grigson to build it out. I would say he's probably ahead of Robinson, but not by much. And then just not a very good general manager, Ray Farmer. He's with the Rams now. He was the Browns GM for 2 years in 2014 and 15. Really bad drafting. That was the dark ages for the Browns. It just did not go very well. Eagles analytics guy gets his own tier. Alec Hallaby. They went the Eagles route. I don't know if you're going to go back to the well on that, right? Like Joe Douglas didn't work. That was Howie's next guy. Alec Hallaby, is that really the next guy? Just doesn't really do a lot for me. I don't think that would make a lot of sense. Louis Riddick, stay on TV. I don't have interest in a guy who never was a GM and was last in the league over a decade ago. He can stay on TV and throw shade at the Jets. I just wouldn't want to hire a guy who spent pretty much the last few years throwing shade at the Jets and Jets fans. Doesn't do it for me. And then Jim Nagy, Senior Bowl boy. I think good to bring him in to talk to him about like the college and drafting and prospects and that stuff. But is he a GM at the NFL level? I don't think so. So for me, with all these guys for the GM and the head coaching tier, my top three options I would say for GM would be Borgonzi, Greenberg, and Damas Dimitrov. And then I would guess for the options that are available right now, I would include for head coaches Vrabel, Flores, Glenn, and I'll also throw in Joe Brady there as guys who excite me. I would like two more guys, one on each, to be really, really good with this group. I would like to interview Todd Monken. That's someone that I would be very high on my list. He might even be in the excited tier for me. But he interviewed for the Jets in 2019, didn't get the job. So I don't know if he's going to go back to them now. Or on the GM side of things, Ray Agnew, who's with the Detroit Lions, I think would rank pretty high for me as well. An Agnew and Aaron Glenn pairing would make a lot of sense, and I would be optimistic about it. Would it be my favorite? I don't know if it's my the best, oh my God, they nailed it option, but I think it would be in my this could work and there's a path to this being successful. So those are two names who have not been added to the list. The Jets have not reached out to interview Todd Monken. They have not reached out to interview. They have not reached out to Ray Agnew yet. But overall, they have a long, long list of guys. It's 12 head coaches, 9 general managers that they've reached out to. It's going to be a busy month. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. I'm Matt O'Leary, and I'll catch you next time.